Hey guys, Sean, Let's Deliver Dummies. Today we are going to install an FSR block into the Tipx. An FSR means D-shaped block. This is a factory Tippmann D-shaped block from their long range kit, and I'll go through little tidbits about long range kit as we get into opening the marker. So let's get started, because I start talking and then the videos get kind of long. Okay, so we'll start by just ejecting our magazine, set it aside. I want to make sure it's obviously degassed. In this case, there is no CO2 in it. You can set your end cap aside, and away we go. Start disassembling. I think it's a 1/8. It is 1/8 Allen key. And you can just start removing your Allen bolts here. They are different lengths, so it's important to put them back in the correct spots. And they are backed by nuts on the other side. Generally, these don't fall out, but just be mindful that once you back these screws out, they may fall out. So do it someplace like on a nice mat or what have you, so you don't go missing all your parts. They don't roll away on you. Set that aside. I'm just gonna pop them out as, oh, and look, that's interesting. I just noticed. See that? I got a different color nut in there. Well, gosh darn it if that doesn't look cool. Yeah, whatever, we'll fix that. Actually, I should be telling you what screws go where here. So these top 3 Allen heads are 2 different sizes. So there's 2 shorter ones. They go on the ends, and there's a long one that goes in the middle. Long one goes in the middle because it actually secures, and here I have a factory block, round ball block on the bench. That screw goes through that sort of half moon there, that cutout, and locks your block into place. So that's the reason for the long one in the middle. Then you have these 2 guys here on your pick rail. I believe they're the shortest of the bunch. And this will be the first time I've opened this one. It's just as easy to poke them open the other side. I know I'm struggling here. It's early in the morning. You can see those guys are the shortest so far. So you got these longer, medium ones, I guess now we'll call them, that went in the ends, and the shortest one, 2 shortest ones go on your pick rail here. Got one more here in the back of the grip, and one here at the bottom. There are lots of Tipx disassembly videos on YouTube already, and actually many of them are done by Tippmann parts themselves, and they are very good videos. So if I miss something or what have you, or hey, you just want it from the horse's mouth, just have a search, because yeah, they do some really thorough videos. So these 2 rear screws, this one here and this one here, are actually the same length as these 2 top screws. So reality here is if you remember, the 2 shortest go here and the longest here. The rest can go anywhere they like. When you open this up, typically you're gonna remove your barrel. When you do that and you crack this clamshell, it's gonna wanna spring open. So if you have your barrel out, you have to hold this barrel block here and then crack the clamshell and keep holding it down, so you can kind of get a look at what's going on. I left my barrel in on purpose here because it'll actually secure everything together and it won't go flying out as easily. You can still dislodge your insides with the barrel install, but it makes for a much better video. So once you get all those screws out, there is right here, you see this kind of, it's got a kind of a lock, this little plastic lock. So you kind of got to just squeeze your grip a little and pull it apart to get it started. And I'm going to do that flat on the table for obvious reasons, but this is where you start right here. So just give that a little unlock. And you can see there, I've undone that little latch and it's coming apart. And just kind of wiggle up on your marker. You can see safety in my case is stuck in this side of the clamshell. I'm just going to set this clamshell aside for now. And voila, there we go. Barrel block, breech block, bolt spring, air chamber / spool valve, regulator, transfer tube, puncture valve, and I don't know, something. This just helps secure your, I don't know the official name, but it's the latch for your end cap. I'm going to now take my block out, or sorry, my barrel out, and we're gonna kind of let this thing unwind itself. So what I'm gonna do here is actually grab, I'm gonna kind of pinch on both halves, on the breech block and the barrel block, to undo my barrel. I'll take this out. Barrel. I'm gonna set it down carefully here so it doesn't go flying. Put my thumb on this one and kind of wiggle this one up. But this was the only thing holding this whole back end together. So I'm gonna set that aside, and it's probably gonna want to spring loose. If it doesn't, then I'm getting pretty lucky here. But as soon as I pull up on this block a little bit, it's gonna want to shoot like that. There you go. So we're gonna pull this D-block, or sorry, this round block out. So this is your factory round block, which is very nice and shiny compared to this other one that I got. This one actually looks like a better quality aluminum. In any case, you can also see here, there's an O-ring inside there. That is your barrel seal. So when you thread this in, your barrel actually seals with that O-ring that's in there like this. You want to make sure you take that O-ring out and install it into your D-block. It's tough to see because it's black, but it is not in there. So I have to remove this O-ring from here and install it into that block. Another purpose of this O-ring is it actually prevents your barrel from, it's like a locker, a thread locker. It stops it from unwinding itself like the M17 does, likes to do anyways. Let me just grab a pick to get that out of there. All right, let's see if we can get this guy out of here. I might have brought the wrong pick. There we go, O-ring's out. And you have to just reinstall it into your block. And it can be a little tricky. The groove is somewhat, it's down there quite a ways. So you just kind of got to hold it in place with your other finger through the back. And there we go. Should have had my headlamp on while I was doing this so you guys can see, but that black is really tough background to get against. But O-ring is in there. You can just confirm that by putting your barrel in, and it should be a little spongy to get it going, and then it should tighten right in. And you can just look down the back. If you got it, you won't see the O-ring. If you missed it, the O-ring will have pushed through when you threaded your barrel in, and you'll just have to try again. Something you might have noticed here is this block has provisions for detents on both sides. Unlike the factory block that has a detent on one side only. Many of these aftermarket D-blocks are single-sided only. And although I did have very good success with the aftermarket block, when I cranked the velocity up, I actually cracked one of them and bent this center screw here on my original Tipx. So I'm gonna give the Tippmann block a chance. And let me pull the rest of this kind of part of the marker apart. So I'm gonna lift the air chamber off here. You kind of gotta lift up on this regulator and you can pull the air chamber apart. You can see there's another little brass stem here, a little transfer tube with an O-ring on it that fits in the side hole of your air chamber. You can see this bumper here, that is the most terrible thing ever, but it does work. So we'll reinstall that. Actually, I can't stand the amount of grease that gets used in these sometimes. I get it. I mean, it's factory assembled, but it really bugs me that, like, look at this, it's just sloppy. So you can carefully pull these things apart. When you separate any of these transfer tubes, be sure to go in squarely. You go in like off on an angle, you can easily tear these little tiny O-rings, and well, then you'll have to replace them. So I'm just gonna wipe all these tubes off here. So much grease. Pull this one out of the regulator. There you can see it's just a mini version of that one. Wipe all this junk off. Like, holy smokes. I mean, grease is cheap, right? So here's an update that I am aware of that I can show you guys on my old original Tipx. The way this regulator is drilled, you can see this little Allen key set screw that's here. Originally, this was a pressed ball they used to seal this pathway that they use when they're machining these, and notoriously it would leak, especially after you adjusted these things way up. So I actually bought this regulator from Tippmann parts and installed it into my old Tipx because that I had a leak there. So I can tell you this is the updated version. I would hope so. It was bought, in the last couple of weeks, but something to look at. Velocity adjuster. I'm not going to take this apart for now because I'm dialing this for CO2. Similar to any regulator, there's a reg spring in there, a piston, a seat, blah, 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 blah. Puncture valve. Now, notoriously, leaks from the Tipx are either from two places. The reg is pretty much the new updated one with that set screw has really been a non-issue now. The puncture valve and the spool valve, which is inside this body, are the general places of an O-ring failure. And I'm not gonna take either of them apart for now. I think Tippmann they did some pretty good videos showing the disassembly of this stuff. And if I need to cross those bridges, I will demonstrate to you guys. But there's the sealing face for your O-ray, or sorry, for your CO2. And you can see, oh, maybe you can't see. You can see that pin come up there. Barely. That's your puncture pin. So when you actually pull the trigger, it functions on this little button here and presses your pin up, punctures your CO2. Bolt spring. You guys, if you're just doing a DBlock swap, you don't have to do what I'm doing here and wiping all this grease off. This is an OCD thing for me. I just can't stand the overuse of it. Bolt, air chamber / spool valve. Sometimes they refer to it as, the reason they refer to it as a spool valve is the shape of the actual moving piston inside. It very much resembles a spool. And another important thing while I'm doing it here, this is your firing valve. And the way this works is, oh, I pushed it in now. Of course. Well, how's the other one? Nope, the other one's in too. When this marker is aired, this pin pops, and that's what makes it ready to fire. As you can see, there's no sear in this marker. And when that pin pops, you can see this trigger arm, this arm right here, that's moving the trigger. So when that pin pops, it actually presses up against this. And what you're doing when you're pulling the trigger is pulling the pin in. So air pressure is pushing this pin out, ready to fire, and you're pulling it in, firing, and then it resets, and so on and so forth. So it's very unconventional see if you're used to like an FSC. But it does work relatively good. Detent, you can see it just stayed in place in the marker. This is a factory Tipx detent. So I brought out a couple here because I don't know what I'm going to do yet. This is a Tippmann 98 detent, which is well known as an upgrade for the Tipx. You can see they're pretty much identical. The difference being that this 98 detent is of much harder material, making it much more durable than this. And they've changed a little bit. It's not as foamy as they used to be. They were very much like a M17 detent, and they were like, yeah, they looked like foam. Like you could squish them laterally. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do yet here. I brought out two of the Tippmann 98s, and I also have a John Wixon M17 detent that I'm probably going to try here. It does fit well. My only concern is the way these detents are designed to work. You can see how short the arm is on it and how it folds back on that top ledge. Well, that's so the bolt can actually travel by it. As you can see how stubby it is in there. It actually folds flat on itself, whereas this Wixon M17 one the arm is so long on it, I would have to nip it to allow it to fold, to recess itself into this cavity that it has. But we'll see here when I put it back together. See how into modding I am today. You got your trigger and your trigger pin. obviously whatever that thing is, again, I can't recall. And we're gonna take this is your mag release right here. Be hard to spot. Take that out. And this arm here, trigger arm, I'm also gonna remove because I'm gonna wipe the whole inside this receiver. That is your trigger arm there. Oh, I almost forgot. Your mag release. So it's just like that. And there's a spring in the back of it. I don't know if that spring comes out. Not very easily. I probably could pull it out, but it's kind of one singular piece and it fits right in this notch here. And there's a recess for the spring there as well. Like that. CD is satisfied. All the extra grease has been wiped out of my stuff here. Then we're gonna put it back together. But before we do that, this was the factory valve that came out of the Tipx. This is a TCR valve, and looking at them from the outside, there is not much difference. This is the factory bolt that comes in a round ball Tipx, and if you notice, it has an O-ring on the end here. A common misconception with the long range kit is it increases velocity. No, it does not. And in my opinion, it's actually less efficient because this is part of the long range kit. This is an FSR bolt. And can you see the difference now? Very, very similar shape, but the FSR bolt does not have an O-ring, and that O-ring leads to better efficiency. But a little tidbit is the O-ring actually isn't necessary, and Tippmann suggests suggests if you don't have an O-ring to repair your factory bolt, if for some reason it gets torn or whatever, that the marker works just fine without it. But I like to use this factory bolt, even when I was using the TCR valve. But I will test this against this coming up. But first I want to go through, I already have a baseline for this one, so we're just going to move forward with this. This TCR valve, although it looks the same on the outside, it is not on the inside. And this valve is not included with your long range kit. It had to be purchased separately, and now that Berna is taking over the sale and well, I wouldn't say production, but at least the sale of the TCR, they've pretty much these valves have become discontinued, and Berna has probably the sole rights to them. And as we know, Berna doesn't share spare parts with you. You have to send stuff to them to get repaired. So I was one of the lucky ones. I got the last few that were kicking around. I mean, you probably still find them. So I'm not saying they're not available, but you're gonna have to look hard. And for the life of me, you can see the wrench marks on there. I tried to get this open because I wanted to show you guys the difference of the inside, but I couldn't get it off. So they may have Loctited this on, and it's not something that I've ever run into, it being that difficult to come off. But in any case, I couldn't. Tippmann, again, has some very good videos that show the inside. I do have a standard valve that I already had cracked open. And if you look, you can see standard valve has all those little holes in there. Whereas a TCR valve, like every second one of those holes is joined. So it's a much bigger surface area for that air to get through. There is another small difference with the actual, this is your spool here. I don't think I can pull it out front. It has to come out the back. So when you air your marker, this spool, okay, and here's another thing. There's actually that firing pin, I guess what we refer to it as in our FSCs and VKSs. There's no seal in this, and this is called the power tube. The way it works is, you can see this is spring loaded. When you air the marker, this spool actually shoots forward into the tube and blocks the path of air out the end. And then when you press your firing valve, the air moves locations on the spool here, that retracts out the front. That's the unscientific description of it. So let's put this thing back together. First things first, your trigger arm sits in there like that, and I like to put a little bit of lube in this end piece here where it actually slides back and forth, sort of the friction point, so to speak. Right on this raised kind of L platform here, and then just drop it in. And you can just check its function by doing that. Your trigger, there's no real lubrication required here. Pin fits pretty sloppy in here. Probably look at upgrading this to an aftermarket assembly like in my other Tipx, but for now, this is what we got. So that boss, that pin there, fits into that hole there, that circular hole. Oops, forgot to put the pin in. Pin goes in that one. Just drop it down and make sure you get it in there. Next is your mag release. Don't want to forget this. If you do, your mag won't release. It'll lock in, but it won't release. And it does go a certain direction here. Okay, so there's an angled section at the top. That goes in the upper position. All right, next we'll put in the CO2 thing because it's easy. Doesn't matter about the orientation. It's got holes in the side that interlock with the actual receiver. Puncture valve. Goes in like this with the block facing out. We will put the bolt back in and the air chamber. And I'll just put some lube on here. And if you guys are thinking, oh, you can add some bumpers on there, don't. The throw on a Tipx is very short, and I added one bumper and the marker would not, it wouldn't cock properly. So just the one factory bumper and the little washer that they use to lock it on is all we get. Little lube on the bolt. All right, actually, I should put this little guy, the little transfer guy back in there. Again, lubrication. Make sure it goes in straight. Like that. Regulator. You kind of just lift your bolt up a little and fit them together. Well, actually, you guys, it's been a while since I did this. Let's just do it like this. You can actually just fit them together like this and drop them together Boom. We will put the bolt spring on. Like that. We've already installed our O-ring, our barrel seal O-ring in there. This is the bumper for your bolt. It fits in the end of the block, just like that. And it's gonna look really funny when you put it together because it's probably not gonna stay put. It's a weird design, but once everything's assembled, it does work. Oh, my long transfer tube. I forgot about this guy. I'll just smear some oil on the ends here. I can actually take my puncture valve out. And slip it into my rig. And you want this tube to be kind of like straight across. So you can see how I can rotate the puncture valve to kind of move the alignment. You want to try and keep it straight across. We still have to put in our mag release. We'll do that last before we put the clamshells together. This is kind of the tricky part because your detent is got to go in. You got to kind of hold it in together as you're putting all this, pushing it all together. So I put the detent in the side. In this case, I'm just going to go with the 98s for now. I'm going to actually do duals. I've never done duals in the Tipx, so I want to know if it's going to work or not. So I like to put my block on its side and squish it all together. And down. Making sure that your detent stayed in its spot there. Now here's where the barrel is going to want to go, or where it's going to want to go flying apart. And this is also where I'm going to do something different. I am not reinstalling this block because I want to try something. It's nothing new, but it's something that I would like to try. And what you can see this donut again, your bumper, you're gonna have to push it up using whatever method necessary, a pick or whatever. Oops, my head in the way there, guys. You can see how I just moved it up into the area it needed to be. Doesn't have to be perfect, but as best you can in that seat as possible. And it will find its home once you cycle the marker. Mag release. We'll reinstall here. And in this case, I'm putting a second detent in. Again, be sure it is the correct orientation, like that. You can see my safety is still in this side of the marker. You can kind of do it either way. I just like to leave it in this side of the marker. And for me, I'm gonna hold the inside of my D-block here and drop this back down, lining up my safety and making sure my mag release is on the outside. Sometimes it likes to go on the inside of the marker. And just start to close it up. Like that. Make sure your piece here, your little latches. Well, you got your marker and it's together like this. Obviously you don't have your block in. Well, I don't have my block in. just check functionality, everything works, before you go screwing everything together. If you remember, longest screw is the center. Once you get this screw secured, you can pretty much let go of your clamshell. There's no real worry of it come shooting apart. Like that. Let's just screw a bearing. I'm just curious. I never run the block list before. There's some discussion in the group about, you know, whether it serves any function. It probably, to some degree, it does create an additional stop for your breech block, which is actually also the stop for the bolt. So it's possible that, I know, it might bend something, but it is secured with this screw. And also there's a kind of a raised lip there. So the results, we will have to test to see what happens. I'll put in the remaining screws here. Shortest screws go in the pick. We'll put those in, and then all the remaining screws can go wherever they like because they are all the same length. Screws are all tightened down. Looking up my mag, my grip, I can see the detents are oriented correctly. It would appear this marker is ready to fire, and first impression without the block, it's weird because, I mean, this thing, it's not that heavy, but without it, it actually, the marker feels a lot different. Let's see if the shaped projectiles will cycle properly. We'll load up some HPs into the Vulcan SMG magazine, because this is where I really want to see if they function good. So that is 8. Oh, is it? Yeah. 8 rounds in there. I'm just gonna do a dry first. Looks like it's seated properly. I know it's tough for you guys to see, but it is nice, flat, and square in there. Let's test fire it. All right, fresh CO2, HP 68 loaded up. Let's see how it does. My only concern is how weak the spring is in this Vulcan SMG mag. Previously, so the velocity is untouched from my last video. The closest example of the HP I had was a Grimberg Jewel, which is 8 grams. I think it was shooting 170, and that was on the second magazine of a 12 gram CO2. So let's see what they do. Puncture. 256. That probably was flying out of there compared to the Jewel of the last time, although that was a first shot. Jam. And here's how I know it's a jam. When I pull the trigger, well, it fired that time, but when you saw me pull the trigger the first time, and that hiss meant that the round wasn't fully seated, and the bolt actually just banged into the back of it, but clearly that little that trigger pull and that bump sent the round properly into the chamber. And you can see I was pointing it in a safe direction, always. So let's keep going. It is a brand new block, brand new detents. Maybe it just needs to seat in a little bit. Nope, another jam, but let's see, will it fire this time? Nope. It actually is not a jam, I think. So then here was the thing I was concerned about. My previous experiments, well, my previous dealings with a shaped block in the Tipx was an aftermarket block, and it only had a hole for one detent. And I think two might be too many. So we're gonna have to open it up, and I'm gonna take that detent out of there. All right, try number two. It was not the HP jamming, it was actually the bolt jamming forward between the two detents. And I did suspect that may have been a problem. I have read about two detents being too much. And it could be a combination of me using those 98 detents. But in any case, the easy fix or attempted fix was just to remove one side for now, and we're gonna retest. And I thought it'd be cool here. So there's fresh CO2 in here, no mag. We can actually see the action when I pull the trigger to puncture. Well, you didn't see anything. I thought maybe the CO2 would move a little. So I'll put the barrel back in here. HP 68. Come on, baby. $260. $238. $224. $224. $228. $226. $230. Last one. Oh, would you look at that? Two detents is too many. Unless maybe I used the crappy kind of foam ones. But for now, that's success. And crunch some numbers, post a video, and I will probably tune my velocity just a little more. Because it is very consistent, and that is what I want, but I want maximum velocity and consistency. And we'll get to it. Thanks, guys.